Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. So I have a relatively recent update on Johnny Depp's libel case against the Sun newspaper in the UK. It's a minor victory, but we take our victories where we can get them. Essentially, Johnny Depp's legal team attempted to introduce evidence from two additional witnesses. These two witnesses are David Kaki Sr., who was Johnny's car mechanic since 2010, and Kate James, who worked for Amber as a personal assistant from March 2012 to February of 2015. A hearing took place on the 13th of May, where a judge decided whether the evidence was admissible or not. We're going to start off with David Kaki's evidence. Johnny's side submitted that David Kaki's evidence directly rebuts Amber's allegations of Johnny being so controlling that he deprived her of her Mustang for 3.5 years. In his declaration, David Kaki states that Amber was inappropriate with him and that she was suggestive while they were in her car together in a parking garage where Mr. Kaki was showing her how to use her new sound system. He further alleges that Amber gave him instructions to work on her Mustang in June of 2016. This is the part of the declaration that Johnny's side argues rebuts Amber's allegations of being deprived of her car, and that in fact, she continuously gave Mr. Kaki instructions to work on that car throughout the course of her relationship with Johnny. Finally, Mr. Kaki also alleged that both Amber and her father were verbally abusive towards him and threatened him when he informed Amber that she was now responsible for paying her car bills as opposed to Johnny, now that she was no longer in a relationship with Johnny Depp, who previously did foot every bill during their relationship. The judge ruled that Mr. Kaki's evidence was irrelevant to the case in its entirety. The judge did provide reasons for his decision, and I agree with every single one of them. With regards to Mr. Kaki's allegations of Amber's inappropriate and suggestive behavior when they were alone in her car, that is completely irrelevant to the case. The case in the UK is a libel case, where Johnny is suing the newspaper for spreading false information about him and ruining his reputation. Amber's alleged behavior towards Mr. Kaki in the car has nothing whatsoever to do with this case. Secondly, Mr. Kaki states that Amber gave him instructions to work on her car in June of 2016. This was after they separated and after Amber filed for divorce. So essentially, this evidence is irrelevant purely because of the time period that Mr. Kaki is referring to. If he stated in his declaration that Amber was giving instructions throughout the course of the relationship, so during the 3.5 years, then it could be relevant to directly rebut Amber's allegations that state otherwise. However, because she gave him instructions after the end of the relationship, it does little in rebutting her allegations, which were particularly referring to the time period in which she and Johnny were still in a relationship together. And finally, Mr. Kaki's allegations of Amber and her father being verbally abusive and threatening towards him. Now, this once again has nothing to do with the allegations that Amber has made against Johnny and that the Sun has published. To everyday people, I can clearly see how this can be construed as relevant, especially Amber's abusive behavior towards Mr. Kaki. But in the law, evidence has strict rules that must be adhered to, and they're there for a reason. They're there to ensure that no unnecessary evidence or unnecessary issues are added to a case, and to ensure that no miscarriage of justice takes place. Evidence is relevant if it has the ability to rationally affect the assessment of the existence of a fact and issue. This is a fancy way of saying, does the evidence help in a meaningful way in proving a fact and issue or an allegation? Amber's behavior towards Mr. Kaki does not in any way prove that her allegations against Johnny are false and that the Sun is guilty of libel. Unlike Mr. Kaki's evidence, the judge didn't rule that Kate James's evidence was admissible or inadmissible in its entirety. Instead, he went through paragraph by paragraph and decided whether each allegation was relevant to the case or not. In essence, Johnny's side submitted that Kate James's evidence is relevant to disproving Amber's allegations of being physically assaulted by Johnny because she saw Amber regularly, sometimes in an undressed state, which means that she got to see every inch of her body, and she indicated in her evidence that she never saw a bruise or any signs of abuse on Amber's body. She also indicated that she witnessed the dynamic between Johnny and Amber, and specifically, she stated that she never witnessed Johnny being abusive in any manner towards Amber. Ms. James also provided evidence of Amber's heavy drinking and her willingness to lie to authorities such as the Australian government when she smuggled in her dogs, and the Immigration Department of the United States, where she lied and stated that her friend Savannah Macmillan was there not for business purposes but for personal reasons as a visiting friend, which was not true. She was working for Amber at the time. The judge outlined a number of points in Kate James's declaration that were irrelevant to the case. Examples of these are her allegations of Amber copying Johnny's style and dressing like him and redesigning her house to look just like his, allegations of tipping off the paparazzi to take photos of Amber, Amber's allegedly abusive behavior towards Kate James herself during the course of her employment, her abuse of prescription medication, and the emotional trauma that Kate James allegedly suffered as a result of working for Amber. These were all found to be irrelevant because, once again, they do nothing in proving or disproving Amber's allegations against Johnny. Just because someone is abusive towards someone else, specifically someone who works for them, so a paid employee, that doesn't in any way establish a connection to show that Amber was also abusive towards Johnny. I can see how, in the eyes of everyday people, one does have something to do with the other. It shows that Amber is an abusive person by nature. However, in the law, we have something that is called tendency evidence, which, as the name suggests, is evidence that is introduced to show that a defendant has a tendency to behave in a certain manner. Now, the thing with tendency evidence is that it is only admissible if, number one, it's relevant, and number two, it has high probative value. High probative value means that it strongly helps in proving that a certain allegation is true. A good example of tendency evidence in this case would be evidence from Amber's previous partners. For example, her ex-wife or ex-girlfriend. She's referred to as wife in the evidence, but the media refers to her as Amber's ex-girlfriend. If she were to provide evidence of Amber's abuse towards her, that is tendency evidence, as it goes to show that Amber has a tendency to abuse her romantic partners. There is a much closer link in that relationship to the relationship that Amber had with Johnny. As for the allegations of Amber copying Johnny and copying his dressing sense and the interior design of his house, I think even to everyone out there who's not a legal professional can see how that really has nothing to do with the case. If it were me and I was taking down the declaration, I would tell them I really don't see how that's relevant. So I would leave it out. All right, so now we can move on to what the judge deemed as relevant and therefore admissible to help out with Johnny's case. In paragraph 16, Ms. James's allegation that Amber drank vast quantities of red wine every night, which the judge deemed to be relevant as it directly rebuts Amber's story, which is that she drank very sparingly. In paragraph 21, Ms. James stated that she saw no sign of a serious or messy fight when she called unannounced. This was deemed to be relevant as it directly responds to Amber's allegations of Johnny wrecking the house and getting into really messy fights with her. In paragraph 22, Ms. James says that she never saw any sign of physical violence on either Johnny or Ms. Heard. Again, this was deemed to be relevant for obvious reasons. Paragraph 24 was relevant to Ms. James's impression of Johnny. The judge deemed this to be of some relevance and that it wouldn't be disproportionate for Johnny to adduce it as evidence to contradict Amber's claims of his character. Paragraphs 25 and 26 concerned Amber's letter to the Department of Homeland Security regarding Savannah Macmillan, and this was deemed to be relevant to Amber's credibility, which means that it can be used to show that she has a tendency to lie. And this is important. This isn't like other tendency evidence. This evidence goes straight to credibility. We're not using it to establish that a fact actually happened. So we're not introducing this evidence to prove that she did in fact lie to the government, but we're introducing it to show that she's not a credible person. She's not a credible witness. So the jury need to be mindful of that. The dog smuggling incident was set aside for a decision on its relevance at a later hearing. Paragraph 32, regarding providing altered certificates of when her dogs, Amber's dogs, were inoculated and whether there was a vet who could be greased or, who could be manipulated or convinced into lying for Amber to corroborate her lies. This matter was deemed to go to Amber's credibility as well, and the judge ruled that Johnny should be entitled to adduce it as well. Finally, the fact that Miss James was dismissed without notice by Amber. This was deemed relevant. I'm assuming because the other side, so the defendants, are claiming that Miss James is a disgruntled ex-employee of Amber's who has a bone to pick with her. And that was it for K. James's evidence. So even though Mr. Kaki's evidence was rejected in its entirety, I agree with the judge, and I don't think it's necessarily a disadvantage or a loss for Johnny, because honestly, Mr. Kaki didn't really have much in terms of evidence to help out with Johnny's case. So basically, even when it was slightly relevant, such as the instructions that she gave to continue the work on the Mustang after the divorce, it was of such low probative value. It would not have affected a jury's assessment of the case in any way. As for Miss James's evidence, whatever was left out, once again, completely low probative value, highly irrelevant, would not have helped Johnny out in any way, regardless of whether it was admissible or not. So the fact that it was left out and ruled as inadmissible is not really a blow to Johnny's case. However, the parts of her case that were ruled as admissible can greatly help him, which is why I said earlier in this video, it's a victory nonetheless. All right, that's it for this video. It is a short one, but it was just a quick update. And since I've been covering Johnny and Amber's case, I thought I'd make a small video to bring this minor update to your attention. Part 2 of my Amber Heard video, where I attempt to rebut all of her allegations, is on the way. So stay tuned for that. This is once again a little filler video. If you've been following this case and if you're interested, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I've been making a lot of updated content regarding this case. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in a future video.